people, and welcome to Finance Skills Hub. Here we learn, we connect, and we grow. In a short video, we want to recreate an earlier video on how to create an interactive inventory management dashboard in Excel. So earlier we used the tools in Excel to create this inventory dashboard, but we want to do the same thing in Power BI. So of course, we are going to take the smooth road and avoid all the complex formulas. But the end goal is that you have an inventory report that is able to see how much you've received, how much you've dispatched, and the quantity available for each product. If you also have your products in shelves or in other categories, there's a slicer to help you monitor how much is outstanding for each category. So there's a lot in here. As usual, we'll share the file with you so you can practice step by step. So if you again join me and let's start in Power BI. Okay, so in the end, this is the report we want to create in Power BI, an inventory management report. So you have the total you've received for the period, the total you've dispatched, and the total available. You also have a chart that shows you the stock availability trends for the period from January to December. Now, below, you also have some option to categorize. So, example, if your products are in shelves, you can actually view these categories using the slices available here. Then there's a summary table that gives you for each product, starting with the product ID, the product name, the shelf it is on, the available quantity for each product. Now, this has been sorted in ascending order so that the ones that you need to pay attention to are always on top. Then you also have for those products the reorder level so that you'll be able to know at which point you have to order. Now, based on the selection, you also have the percentage of availability, right? So this you can select by shelf. You also have the list of all your products here, so you can actually select a particular product just to monitor and then keep track. Okay. So earlier we created this in Excel, but we want to challenge ourselves and also do this in Power BI. So we can now download the files in the YouTube description and then come along step by step. Okay, so let's start with our Excel workbook. There are two sheets in the workbook, but just to give you a little understanding, the architecture is like this. You have a table. We are going to convert this into a table that has the register of all your products. So you have a product ID, the product name, the shelf it is on, the reorder level, okay, and the reorder quantity, right? So reorder level is the point where you bring in new items, okay, and then the reorder quantity is how much you bring in if you have to order, right? So if you look at the architecture or the profile of this table, is basically a lookup table for all your products. We only touch this table when we are adding a new product. Okay, so it is, if you like, a bit static. So this is a dimension table, right? Now, the other table or the other sheet is where the transactions take place. That table is a bit more fluid. So this now captures every point in time when you receive items and then when you dispatch. Of course, you have to put in the date and the ID of what you are receiving or what you are dispatching. Another thing that you need to make note of is the fact that the receipts are positive numbers and then the dispatched items are negative numbers. So that at every point in time, the net is what is going to give you the outstanding for each item. So it's a pretty simple architecture. But if you understand it, it helps you know which table you're going to use as a dimension table or a lookup table, and the one that you're going to use as a transactions table, which is our fact table. In the end, we'll connect these two tables so that we can calculate from the transactions table and then get the further and better details from the dimension table. Right, so a little context in there. So now that you understand, let's proceed and convert this into a table. So you can stand in any single cell and then press Ctrl T. So you confirm your table has headers and you click OK. So at this point, you can choose to name your table products. This way, when you add and you refresh, all your calculations also updates in the Power BI. Then we go to the transactions, another Control T, and we click OK. So this we are going to name transactions. Okay, so now that you've done this, you can close, save your Excel file, and we come to a fresh Power BI report. Okay, so basically what we are trying to do here is to bring in the workbook that we just saved and closed. So I'll come to get data. We are picking it from an Excel workbook. So this is where my file is. I'm going to double click. Okay, and it takes a while. So the first point is going into Power Query. I get the option to preview what I have in there. So it gives me a list. The first two, the icon with the blue bar, are tables. We just did that. And then the ones that don't have the blue bar are the worksheets. Okay, so you should be able to differentiate between the two. So we are committing the table products and then the table transactions, right? Just these two, and then we'll go ahead and transform the data. Okay, so now that our queries are in, right, we just take a glance to be sure that all the columns are present and they have the right data type, right? So ABC means text, 1, 2, 3 means whole numbers, so these are fine. You could also take off the suffix, so you have just products for this name. Same for transactions, we have dates, product ID, so all have been profiled correctly, and then we name those transactions. Okay. If you followed our videos, we could at this point create a calendar table which will allow us to break our analysis down by dates or time, right? But just to give you another angle to this, we will just keep the queries as it is and then create the calendar table this time around in the data model, right? So that you have an idea how to create it in both settings. So there isn't much to do here. After we've loaded, the data is clean. There isn't any change here. So we are going to close and apply and then load this table into Power BI. So once you have confirmed what the data types are, you can come to Home, close and apply, and just commit these two queries to the main interface. Okay, so our queries have been loaded. You see it under data. So I have products here. All the columns are here. My transactions are also here, right? Now, as I mentioned, we need to go and connect these two tables, having the end in mind. What we want to do is to calculate from the transactions and be able to break down by the product's name and the shelf, right? Those can be found in the products table. So if you look at the final dashboard too, beyond being able to break down by product name and shelf, you also need to break down by month, right? So because of this analysis, you have to create what we call a calendar table, which gives you a dedicated table that contains all the dates in your analysis in a series, right? So let's go and get the calendar table done. So to do that, you come to the table view, okay? So in the table view, your products and your transactions are still here. So under the table tools, you have the option to create a new table. So we'll click on this and then we'll create a new table. So I'm going to name this calendar, right? And it's going to be a very simple formula. We'll use calendar auto, right? So this function, what it does is that it scans all the tables in your model, starts with the earliest, and then gives you a sequence in the daily form all the way to the latest dates. Okay. So calendar auto, open, close brackets, and then you press enter, right? So as you notice, it starts from the 1st of January 2023 and goes all the way down, giving me 365 rows. I have the option to format this. So currently it's date and time. Under format, I can come here, right, and then choose any of these formats. So I'm going to choose this one, right, so that it formats it appropriately. Now, to be able to sort the dates and then also to extract the month names, we are going to create two new columns, right? So this is the original column. In the table setting, I have the option to add a new column. So under column tools, I'll come to new column right? And first thing we are going to do is we want to create the month values. One for January, 2 for February, right? So let's call this month is equal to the function month, okay? Then we reference the original date column. Okay, so once I do this and I press enter, I get the 1 to 12 series. This will be useful in sorting the order the month appears. Now, we are done with this. Let's go and create a new column that gives us the month name itself. So to do that, again, I'll come to new column. Okay, so it starts a new formula. Now this I'm going to call month name. Right. We already have the dates. So what we are going to do is just format the dates to extract the month name. Right. In that function is called format. We give it a value. The value here is the date column. Ensure that it is this date that you have with a square bracket. So we commit this one. Right. Sometimes you also have the inbuilt time intelligence date columns also coming along. Right. So those ones have a dot. Right. So it's just this one that we are referencing the date. So after that, you bring a comma. Okay. Then the format that we are looking for is in double quotes MMM. Okay. So MMM would give us the abbreviation for each month. And then you close your bracket. Okay. So you press enter. And then you have something like this. So just to be sure, we now have the full list of all the months in the year. Okay. So this is another way to create a calendar table. We are going to use this to create that trend chart that you saw earlier. Right. So we are done with this. Now, it's important that once you created this table, you mark it as a date table. Okay. So we'll come here and then we'll just switch this on to mark as a date table. It will ask us to commit the column that has the dates. We'll choose this one. It's validated successfully and then we can click save. Right. So our job with the calendar table is done. Now let's jump to the data model. Okay. So in the data model, our job here is to connect the tables. Right. So if you understand how the data model works, we have the fact table, which is the transactions. This is where our calculations come from. And then the products contain our details. So the lookup for all the products, their names, their shelves, this is going to sit here. And then we have our calendar table, which we just created. So these two top tables will give us further and better details. It is normally the tables that we use to slice our calculations, right? So let's assume that they were not connected. I'm deleting this. Okay. So the usual arrangement is that we put the dimension tables at the top and then it flows into the transactions table, which is a fact table, to help us break down using our slicers. You need to identify the common columns. So between products and transactions, right? The primary column here is product ID. So you take product ID, then you slide it and come and meet or join it with product ID over here. Okay, so this allows you to see the details of the connection you are creating. This is the first table, and then this is the second table. It is a one-to-many relationship, and the cross-filter direction is single, means it comes from the top and filters the transaction table. If you're okay with this, you click on save. So your table have now been connected. We'll do same for the calendar. So again, the common column here is date and dates, the primary columns. So I'll take this. You can take it from the top or down, doesn't matter. So I'll come and then I'll overlap this same scenario. Dates going into the dates that we have here is a one-to-many, and then we'll click save. Okay, so our data model now has been created. Now, what it means is that all our calculations can now be filtered by product and calendar. So now that we've done this, let's proceed and then create our measures. So if you look at our final table, report, there are essentially about 4 key measures. You need to first calculate the total received, the total dispatched, and then the total available. Then we'll calculate the percentage. Okay. So these are the 4 main calculations that we need to do. We are going to put this in a dedicated table called measures. So first, let's create that dedicated table. So first, I'll come in here. So to create that table, I'll come to modeling. Under modeling, I'll start a new table. So over here, what I need to do is I'm going to create a placeholder for the measures. So you just start with a square bracket, leave a space, and then type measures. So this way you will end up with an empty table, right? So space, measures, close square brackets, then you bring an equal sign. Okay, ensure that after the equal sign, there's nothing here, then you press enter. Right, so this brings you a table at the top where you're going to post all your measures. So this is available. It comes with an empty column. You can ignore that for now. But let's start our first measure. So the first measure is going to be the calculation of the quantity available. A rather simple calculation where we take the total received and then we subtract the total that has been dispatched. Right, so let's do that. You right click on the measures table, start a new measure. So let's call this quantity. So it's a sum of the transactions table, okay, on the quantity column, right? So this is all that we need to calculate. Okay, so I'll press enter, and then this gives me how much is available after the subtraction. Now we also need to know how much has been received. Okay, so if you look at the structure of our table, you will notice that in the transactions table, there's a date, there's a product ID, there's a transaction type. This column would allow us to filter how much has been received and how much has been dispatched, right? So these labels are going to be useful. Now that we've calculated the quantity, we just need to sort of bring in the criteria that if it filters by receipt, then we are essentially calculating total receipt, total received. If it filters by dispatch, then we are calculating total that has been dispatched, right? So let's do that using the DAX function calculate, right? So I'll start a new measure. So new measure. So we'll come in here and then let's calculate this as receipts. So this is going to be equal to calculate. So what calculate does is that you give it an expression or any calculation that you have done, and then you apply a filter, right? So we've already covered the quantity calculation. So you bring a square bracket, you bring this, then you proceed with the filter. So I want this filtered where the transaction type, okay, so this is where we have the transaction type, is equal to receipts, right? You need to ensure that you spell this correctly, just as you have it in the table, right? So where the quantity has been filtered by receipts, this is what I'm looking for. Okay, so now just to be sure we are doing the right thing, I think we can now visualize our calculations to see we are getting the right numbers. These are our measures, right? So you can click, hold, and then drag it into the canvas. Okay, so this gives us 4540 as our receipts. So using the same method, let's now calculate for the total dispatched. So I'll come to our measures table, right click, and then post a new measure. So over here, let's call this one dispatch. Same formula, calculate, then we commit the quantity that we have calculated, and then we filter this where transactions type is equal to dispatch. So I'll close my brackets and then press enter. So again, let's visualize this and see we have the right calculation. So I'll bring this here. So it's minus 2827. Remember, the numbers are negated, so this is expected. If you don't want to see the positive numbers, you can run an absolute number around this. You can run an absolute function around this, right? So here, you can stand before the calculate and then run ABS. So ABS is the function that neutralizes the negative number, right? So you close your bracket for that and then you press enter. So this gives us 2827. Now we've already calculated the quantity, so let's bring in the quantity. So if what we have done is correct, then it means the total received, the total dispatched, and the total quantity should sync, right? So those are our three main calculations. Now that we've done this, let's go ahead and create the calculation for our stock availability, right? So this is going to be our fourth measure. So that is going to be a division of the quantity available over the receipts. Okay. So again, we'll come here, right click, new measure. Normally when you are dividing in Power BI, it is good to use the divide function. So let's call this availability. So we use the divide function, requires a numerator and a denominator. So my numerator is going to be the quantity available, and I'll bring a comma, bring a square bracket, and then put in the quantity that has been received. We like the divide function because it gives us a third option to provide an alternate value if we have an error. So over here, you can put in a 0, or you can put in a double quote, which is a blank. You close your brackets, then you press enter. Okay, so for the availability, we want it in percentage. So once this measure arrives, it's selected. So under the measure tools, you see the option to format this as a percentage. Okay, so again, let's drag this here to see what we have. So we have 37.73%. We'll be creating a donut chart from this, right? So you realize there's a donut chart that has a portion reflecting or showing the availability. The unused part, right, is the 1 minus the availability. So to be able to create this, we need to create that measure, right, so that it always gives us the balance or the remainder. So let's go in there and create that. So again, come to my measures, new measure. Let's call this remainder. So that is going to be 1 minus availability, okay, which is the calculation that we did earlier. Then I press enter, right? So this is going to also be formatted as a percentage. So I'll come to remainder and then format this as well, right? I mean, we don't really need to bring this, but just to be sure that we have the right calculation, we can bring this here, right? So the two of them should always bring us 100%. So I can delete this later, we'll bring it in the visualization. So essentially, we are now done with our calculations, our modeling, and everything that we need. So let's focus on how to visualize to make it easier to get insights. Okay, so let's go through how we are going to visualize this. We've already made our key card calculations. So we'll put this in the card. Then we'll now create a line chart based on the quantity available and then break it down by month. We'll put in 2 slicers, one for product name and then the other for the shelf selector. And we use the matrix visual to now create this summary table. Okay. Then finally, we'll put a donut chart to represent the percentage available. Of course, what we are going to do is, after we've set the stage for this, we'll bring in a PowerPoint background that will give it a bit more context and provide the placeholders to make it more elegant. Right, so that is the approach we are going to do. So first, let's try and create the stock availability trend, and then we'll proceed with the rest of the visuals. Now, for the stock availability, what we basically need is to bring in the line charts, this one. Okay, so we'll bring in our line charts. Now you'll notice that we need to provide the x-axis and the y-axis. So for our x-axis, we are going to provide our month names. So we'll put in our month names. And then for our y-axis, we'll come to our measures and then put in the quantity outstanding. Okay, so we have something like this. Now, you notice that some things are not right here. It starts from February, shouldn't. It should actually start from January. So what you need to do is to go and order the months correctly. So you come to the tables and then look for the calendar table, select the month name. Okay, then under the column tools, you have the option to sort by. Now, this is the reason we brought in the month values 1 to 12. So with that selected, we'll ask that this is sorted by the month values. So usually it doesn't reset in real time. What you need to do is to take off the month name and then add it back. So I'll come to the calendar and then I'll select the month name. So this time around we have January to December. Now if you take a close look, what this is calculating is essentially the net figures at every point in the year, right? That is not the right calculation, right? That is why you have some negative numbers showing in here. What we actually need is a running sum so that it carries the previous balances onwards, because there's no point where we operated with negative numbers. So we need to calculate the running sum. Now to do this, there's now an easier way to create some of these calculations. So you can select your visual and you can go to modeling and you can now use the new visual calculation. So this is an easier way to create your calculations without starting an original DAX calculation. So if this is enabled, you can use it from here. If it's not, you can go to File, Options and Settings, Options. Okay, it's a new feature, so it's generally available, but just in case you don't have it, then you go to the global and choose Preview Features. Okay, so over here, this is visual calculations. So you can activate that. Makes it easier to calculate directly on the visual. So I have modeling, so I'll go to New Visual and then I'll create. There are some you can use originally here. So let's create the running sum on this. Okay, so this is the running sum. It basically gives you the name of the calculation and then the function you are going to use, and you have to provide the field. Okay, so let's replace this placeholder with quantity, because this is what we want to run the sum on. So this is the quantity and I'm going to press enter. Okay, so once I do that, you notice that I now have two values. So quantity is here and then the running sum. This is the one that we need, right? Now our chart also updates. So if you see, our chart already has the running sum running. Now if I activate the data icon, okay, you now see my month name, my y-axis with the quantity and running sum. You can choose to hide the original calculation because we'll be dealing with the running sum. So I can use the hide from visual tool so that I now have my running sum in the visual, but the quantity is still present in the original calculation. We cannot delete this because the running sum relies on it. Okay, so if the visual is visible, you can activate the data icon, okay, and then you can activate the build icon and then just hide the original calculation. So once you are done with this, we'll come back to our report. Okay, so this is the right calculation. So this is our running sum. So this we can put here. Okay, so now that we have done this, let's now go and do our summary table. So for our summary table, that's going to be a matrix. Okay, so for our matrix, we'll come home and then insert a matrix. So this is the matrix. So insert this here. So basically, we need to bring in the product ID, the product name, the shelf is on, the quantity available, and then the reorder. Right. So if you look at the final work, this is what we are trying to create: product ID, product name, shelf, quantity, and then reorder level. All right. So let's bring in these values. So for the matrix, I'll start with the rows. For the rows, I come to the products, and then I'll bring in product ID. I'll bring in product name, then I'll bring in the shelf. Okay, so the default layout is the compact view, right? So all the values I'm putting in here are stacked under each other, right? So now that we provided the rows, let's come to the value section. So in the value section, we want to provide the quantity. So I'll come to the value section and then put in quantity for this, right? So I have quantity. And I want to also see side by side the reorder level so I can compare. So again, in the value section, I'll come in here and then add from the product section, the lookup for the reorder level. So I'll add this. Now it is counting it. Okay, so what we need to do is we'll have to come and change the summarization and then choose the sum. Okay, so that we are able to see the reorder level for this. Okay, now let's clean up our matrix a bit. So we'll go to the format visual and we'll take off the column subtotals and then the row subtotals. We'll go to more options, right? Let's start from the top. Now we'll pay attention to the layout and style presets. So over here, I mentioned earlier that there are some default styles that we could use, right? So you can use none, minimal, all these are preset custom styles. For what we are trying to do, we want to set this to none, okay? What none does is that it makes it very plain with a transparent background. So you can be able to lay it over the background that you are bringing from PowerPoint. So we'll choose that one for now. Now for the layout, it's set to compact. We are going to choose the tabular. Okay, so when we choose tabular, right, the expectation is to see all the columns that have been stacked under each other. But at this point, what we need to do is use this icon to expand all down one level in the hierarchy, right? So we use this icon to expand. So this way, we can now see our product ID, product name, quantity, and the sum of reorder level. So we'll expand it further to bring the shelf, okay? So just ensure that this has been set to the lowest level of the data so that you can now see your product name, product ID, and all the columns that you started with. Okay, so we have all our columns present. Now let's go in and then see what else we can do here. So the next one is the grid. So for grid, because we are using a plain background, we can bring in the horizontal grid to help us with the lines, and then also activate the vertical grid lines. Okay, so we have something like this. Then for our border lines, we can choose to change the colors of our border lines or not. We'll leave it as it is. Then we can make changes to our options as well on row padding and all that. So basically what we need for now is just the columns displaying. Later, we are going to now format this properly. Okay, so we'll leave this for now and then come and concentrate on our donut chart. So for our donut chart, the availability is already here. This is already a card. So we are going to change this into a donut chart. Okay, so this is going to give us that full ring. But it's not only this we want to visualize. We'll come to the add data. And here we want to add the remainder. So I'll come to the measures and then bring in the remainder. Okay, so this is going to give us the other parts of our donut chart. For this, we are going to keep it plain. So title will go off, legend will go off. Okay, and then we also take off the detailed label. Under slices, we'll make the inner radius a bit bigger, set it to about 70. Okay, so we have something like this. Right, so essentially we've done the main staging for our visual. The last thing that we need to do is to bring in our slices, right? So for our slices, there are two that we need to bring in, one for the shelf and then one for the product name. So selecting a blank space, selecting an empty space, we can come in here and then bring in the slicer. So this is the slicer, right? So for this one, we are adding the shelves, which we can find under the product. So I'll come here and then put in the shelves. While this is here, we can change the slicer settings. Instead of a vertical list, we are going to use a tile. Okay. Now this is normally responsive to the shape and size. So you just have to stretch it and squeeze it in a bit so that you have it standing vertically, right, stacked on each other. So this is going to be for our shelves. We'll repeat the same step for our product name. So we'll bring in another slicer. So this is a slicer for product name. So I'll come in here and then drop this down and then fill this in with the product name. Okay, for our product name, we want to keep it simple. So instead of a vertical list, we are going to keep it as a drop down. Okay, so that it can just be in the corner for selection. So this is going to be our product name. So don't worry about how it looks right now. We are just going to perform a little magic to bring everything in line and make it sync. What is important here is that you have your key indicators. You have your key visuals present. Okay, so now that we've set the stage, normally I like to work on the theme. So the theme gives it a very uniform approach in terms of the colors and the font size and all that. So you go to view. Okay, so these are the themes. So the theme I normally like is the classic, right? So we are going to set this to the classic view. So we set this to the classic view. So you realize that this improves the appearance a bit. Okay, now we have the layout set. So let's now bring in the PowerPoint background. The PowerPoint background has been shared with you. So this is a regular PowerPoint slide, right? We have our shapes here. Okay, we have our text boxes, and then we have some regular shapes that we've put in some colors to make it a bit more elegant. So usually what you do is that you save this as an image. So F12, and then you save this as a JPEG, PNG, or SVG, right? So any image file is fine. So you save it as a JPEG, and then you go ahead and then you save this as an image file. So once you save this as an image file, you come to your Power BI, then you come to Canvas background. So this pane is available. If not, you can right click and then you choose Format Canvas. Okay. So over here under Canvas background, you go and lift the image that you just saved. So I'll click on image. So my background is here. So I'm going to double click this. So usually when it comes in, the transparency is set to 100%. So you need to reduce this to 0%. And you can set this to normal or fit depending. Okay. So let's reduce the zoom a bit. Okay. So you realize that I now have all the placeholders that I need for my visual. Now let's gently use the placeholder to align all the calculations that we've done. So I'll start with the receipts. Okay, so we'll take this one. So for this, we'll ensure that we take off the category labels because we already have a header here, right? So this is going to be for received. I'll do the same thing for dispatched. So using the height of the earlier one, you can set this. So again, we'll come in here and then take off the category label. So we'll fit this one as well. Okay, what is important is that it aligns with the previous. Then we come to available. So we do this here. We'll come to the format visual, take off the category label. So we'll bring this here and align it nicely. So just make sure that it sits inside the visual and it's aligned to the previous one using the red line as a guide. Okay, so we have something like this. Then we'll come to our charts. So again, this is the placeholder for it. So some of the items you can take away. So the title will not be needed. Okay, you just fit this inside the placeholder that you have for the chart, stretch it all the way to the end. There are some settings that we need to do to the chart. So I'll come to more options. Okay. Now over here, we are going to take off the label for the y-axis. So if you come to the y-axis, we'll take off the label. We are going to bring in data labels for this. So let's go down and under the lines, okay, we'll open up the lines. We are going to come to the line style. Okay, so for the line style, we'll maintain it as solid, and then we'll go to the interpolation type. It's currently linear. We'll set it to step. Okay, so this gives us something like this, right? So that is going to be the format. We set the interpolation to step. Then we'll switch on the shade area, right? So the shade area will fill in that gap. Then while we are here, we'll activate the data labels. Okay, so this is going to complete our stock availability trend. Okay, now let's bring in the percentage of stock availability donut chart. So that one has its place over here. Okay, so it's already set, but all we need to do is to bring in a card that will show the availability, right? So because we already have that measure calculated, we'll come to measures and we'll bring in the calculation for availability. This is going to be a card, so you just drag it right here. Okay, so this is the card that we can fit right inside the donut chart, right? So just make sure it's aligned properly and this should be fine. So that is the settings for the donut chart, right? Now let's spend some time on the matrix. Because we already have the background set, right? You need to ensure that the font type and all those things align. Okay, so this is what we have. Okay, what we are trying to do here is to make sure that the font type and all the things that we have align using the spaces that we have given. So let's select the visual, go to the format, we come to more options, right? First, we need to work on the values, right? So to set the right font type. So let's increase the font type to about 13. Okay, so we increase this to about 13. This only affects the values that you put, the columns that you put in the value section, right? So we'll repeat the same thing for our column headers. We set this to 13 as well. Okay, so we already have that. You can bolden this for it to stand out. And then for our row headers, we'll do the same thing. So we'll set this to 13 as well, right? Now the reason we are doing this is to make it a bit more visible. So we are going to filter this visual based on the quantity, right? So here, if this is selected, we would engage the filter pane, which is here. Okay, so over here, you realize that you have all your fields, product ID, product name, and all that. You can pick any of the row values. Product ID is currently filtering on all, right? So you select it, come to product ID, you see basic filtering, right? So you drop this down and then you choose top N. So you want to filter this to show the bottom 10. Okay, so this is top N. You select the top N and then we choose bottom, right? So based on the quantity available, we'll put in bottom 10, right? And it needs some basis to calculate that. So the value I'm going to put in here is the measure for the quantity that we have available. So you come to the data icon, then you take quantity and then you drag it to the value section, right? So basically we are filtering using top N, but it's bottom. So the bottom 10 by quantity, and then we apply the filter to this. So what it's going to do is that at every point in time, it's going to show us the bottom 10, right? For the selection that we have done. Okay. So now that we've done this, we can now come in and then rearrange our values. So we can now rearrange or realign our values. So we'll expand product ID a bit, take the product name. So you just hover to the end, okay, and then you just arrange it in such a way that it sits in the right spot. Okay, so this is, if you do it from the left, it's easier, right? So we just push this a bit to the right. Okay, so we are getting close. Now we can change the titles. Okay, so if you look at some of reorder level, it's just too long. So if you select this and then you come to the data icon, okay, you get the option to rename this. So this is reading a sum of reorder level. You can double click inside and then just use reorder level for this. Okay. So once I press enter, you notice that I have reorder level. Now there are a few tweaks that we need to do. So once I have this, I can go back to the format visual and then probably reduce the column headers, okay, to maybe a size of 12 to ensure that this fits. And while I'm here, I can set the alignment, okay, so you can set it center or you can set it to the right, okay. So let's try the center. Okay, so we have something like this. So depending on your screen, you just have to play with this till you get to the point where everything aligns. Okay, so I'll keep stretching this all the way. Okay, so we are almost there. I'll take the quantity, so always hover and then stretch it a bit to the right, and the shelf also goes inside like that. Okay, so we are almost there. It will require you to do a bit of plus and minus depending on your screen size. But the essential learning point is that once you have it set to a transparent style, this background will guide you on how to set it, right? You could always use the mouse to hover. So right at the end of the label, you always have this to click and hold, right? And then just move it left or right to set it, right? So just a little detail to get it right. So we have this, but the main focus here is we want to see the quantity. So you can sort this so that the lowest quantity always starts at the top. So we have something like this. Okay, so that will complete our bottom 10 stock quantity. Then we'll fit our slicer down here. So again, we'll put our slicer here. We'll take off the slicer header. Now, for our slicer, we want it to agree with the theme that we have. So we'll come to the slicer settings. And then in the value section, we'll come here, come to the background, okay, and then the color, we set it to the main theme here, which is the green color, okay. So if you like, you can also change the font to white while you are here, okay. So that will make this agree, right. So at this point, when we click, you'll notice that the shelves respond and it's able to slice the values that we have over there. Well, we shouldn't forget our final slicer, which is the product name, is also here. So we can select a particular product to again see how these indicators are. So at this point, a bit more minus and plus, but the essential idea is that from those two tables that you saw in Excel, we've been able to calculate the total received, the total dispatched, calculate the total available. We're able to use the new visual calculation to create the running sum, created this trend chart. We've created our percentage of stock available, use the matrix to create this transparent table that sits on the background, and then we have our slicers bringing us further and better details. So hopefully you learned some few things here. I hope you'll be able to complete and create something even more exciting. As usual, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.
If this video was helpful and you would like to receive more of these videos directly on your WhatsApp, you can send ad to this WhatsApp number. We'll add you to our broadcast list so you receive our videos directly. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Finance Skills Hub. All our old videos are here. Please subscribe for notification of new videos or connect with us on any of these social media handles. Thank you so much for watching.